there, and welcome to the Recovery Crew. I'm looking at the screen here. I see the return of Dan Griffin. We could title it that. Camille Reid is our co-host, and Dan is going to be our special guest again. Hopefully you heard the podcast last week where you got to hear a little bit of his story, and he's one of the main dudes on the planet in terms of men's psychology and men's healing work. One of the actual trauma-informed guys that are doing work with men, which is really good. Which we may even poke around a little bit today with on the topic of the fifth step. The fifth step is the one in the 12 steps where we begin to crack open that, so sort of challenge that masculine part of our psyche that wants to stay hidden and keep all of that stuff compressed. We start letting it out and being able to connect with others. And so we'll talk more about that. So glad that I get to dance with you two folks, and I'm glad that we got an audience out there that's listening. And so hello, that's my way of saying hello to you, Dan and Camille.
Hi.
Hey,
Thanks
Bob.
for having me on again.
All right. Where are you, Dan? You're in California, right?
I'm in Los Angeles, California. Culver City, actually. Culver City, if you listen to public radio, where they're always broadcasting
That's
from
right.
DC and Culver City.
That's right. That's the city where you can actually spend 5 hours to get to the other side, right?
Hardly.
No, I mean, isn't LA in that? I mean, to get from
LA for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Culver City is a tiny little city inside of LA. It's great.
Right, but yeah,
It's
you can
great.
get around within Culver City, but if you ever want to venture out, it's a major decision.
It is.
All right, so Camille is our programs coordinator and manager of Deep Waters Recovery, and she's going to let folks know what's going on here. Please.
Yeah, here at Deep Waters, we're an advanced recovery and healing experience for men and women. The Deep Waters Intensive, or DWI, is going to be happening later this summer, September 2021. Keep an eye out for that. It's a 3-day transformational trauma resolution experience that uses psychodrama, bioenergetics, and rituals of empowerment. And then we've got our experiential facilitators training, which is going to be June 4th and 5th, probably around the time that this is coming out. But the next one that you can sign up for is going to be August 20th and 21st. That's an opportunity for anyone who works with others to do their own inner work and learn action tools to use in groups. So spaces are going to fill up quickly for that. So just keep an eye out. You can find information on our website at deepwatersrecovery.com, or you can reach out to us at admin at Deep Waters Recovery. We've got our weekly blogs that come out on Mondays. The podcasts come out on Fridays. And then you can like, follow, share, and subscribe to all of our channels. And then you can also follow Bob on TikTok as a recovery and trauma guy.
Yep. Really bad therapy suggestions. You can get really bad therapy suggestions on my TikTok channel. Okay, let's transition here. There's Dan Griffin. If you ask around the addiction world, which is pretty vast, who's the expert on men's work? Occasionally somebody might say Bob Beare, but usually a lot of times you'll hear Dan Griffin is the guy. Been doing it a long time and bringing a lot of depth and wisdom to an industry that could use some depth and wisdom. let me leave it there. Dan is the author of A Man's Way Through Relationships, which is a book about men to help men create healthy relationship. He developed the Man Rules, which you might have heard on the podcast last week. It's a pretty interesting set of concepts. He's also the author of A Man's Way Through the 12 Steps, which is really the first trauma-informed guide for men to go through the 12 steps. He's also a senior fellow at the Meadows from 2015 to 2017. That's a pretty good credential right there. The Meadows has birthed most of the quality healing work that's in institutional in the institution of the addiction world. I think I could say it that way. There's probably a better way to say it, but anyway, welcome here, Dan. So glad you're with us, brother.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us. Thank you. Well, having me, and thanks for the kind words.
Yeah. Well,
appreciate it.
That's the short version of the resume. He's a little bit like me. When you get to be just to see the gray in the temples there, when you get to, there's a certain point where you have to like carve down the resume so you can like get it in a paragraph rather than 10 pages. So
I hear you.
That was the short version.
Yeah.
All right, so we are going to have a discussion. We're going to have a discussion about step 5 today. I'm going to turn Dan loose with that here in a minute, and Camille and I are going to dance with that with him. But step 5 is we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. So, our wrongs, whatever that is. There's 8 different ways that Bill Wilson tried to describe what Carl Jung called the shadow, the part of us that we don't know much about, that's hidden, that a lot of times other people can see better than we can. He calls it character defects in one sentence, our wrongs in another. There's 3 or 4 other references, but really what we're looking at is the unconscious part of us that has been running the show. And for those of us that poured fertilizer on our existent character defects with drugs, alcohol, acting out in a million different ways. For those of us that kind of exaggerate, we have to look at that stuff for survival purposes. It's not a bad idea for anybody to have a program to look at themselves. That's why the 12 steps are not just for us wackos. I think it's the popular expression of Dr. Carl Jung's idea for humanity. Let me just, step 5 is not something to be done on its own. The steps are in order for a reason. The first step, preceding the first step, we learn about the disease of addiction, which is pretty tricky and takes a while to understand how this thing gets up underneath the psyche and takes over. First 164 pages of our book that we use sort of describes that. But the first step, we look at how we're powerless and how that we can't stop, essentially, and that it's created a lot of trouble in our lives. Second step is, well, maybe there's another solution. The third step has to do with really surrendering, which it does not come natural to a lot of us. Surrender is not the word that I was taught to lead with. That's the third step, and there's work to be done there for all of us. The fourth step is what tees up the fifth step. The fourth step is a very specific assignment. There's more work to be done in that. That's why a lot of people avoid it for a very long time and refer to it and talk about the fourth step. The fourth step. Oh, yes, the fourth step. The fourth step is a set of actions where I have to actually grab the pen with this thing here, my hand, and write things down on a piece of paper. And I have a lot of resistance to doing what we call the inventory work. But it's very important, and to do it well and extensively. And it begins with looking at our resentments. It's very tricky. My resentments turn into the things that I need to work on within myself. And later on, I'll probably be doing amends with the people I have the most resentments toward. It's very tricky and very Jungian. If we have any Jungians listening, it's very Jungian in that way. Okay, so that brings us to the fifth step, where we share with our God, whatever that is for you, right? And with another human being and with ourselves, all of this work that we did in the fourth step, and we sit down with another person to do it. One thing I want to say here is that all of the stuff that we're saying, Dan Griffin might be an expert, but even his shit may or may not be true for everybody. We are not the experts on 12-step recovery. We're not putting ourselves out there that way. We have some experience, and we're going to put that out there, but take what you want and leave the rest. So there's my teeing you up, Dan. So why don't you just kind of start this dialogue about the fifth step?
Sure, that was well said. I appreciate it. I mean, definitely just some ideas. This is a conversation about the step. some ideas about the step, and some personal experience with the step. You know, what's interesting to me is that recovery transforms us, giving us more ability to share in relationships. I mean, ultimately, that's what recovery is from my perspective. It's an opportunity to engage in relationships. And the beginning of that transformation is rooted in step 5, because this is the first time that we're involving another human being in the process of working the steps. And to me, it's, you know, step 4 is this powerful process, like you talked about, of resentment and fear and sex inventory, really like these dark areas of our lives, and yet such necessary areas of our lives and our relations and relationships. And but step 4 is private in many ways. And step 5 moves us into the we in a really profound way. I mean, I think if there were one word to sum up step 5, to me, it would be intimacy. That it is really, I mean, there's vulnerability, there's a confessional component to it, a beautiful confessional component to it, not the traditional confessional component to it in some ways, but a beautiful confessional component. But there is this intimacy that is so powerful that happens. And I know that, you know, that was my experience. You know, into me you see. And that's what I'm really letting you have with this experience. And I connect through the higher power. I connect to the higher power. I connect to that God of my understanding, whatever that is, but something bigger than me. To most people do it with a sponsor, but some people, and they talk about this, you can do it with a trusted advisor, you can do it with a clergy member, you can do it with somebody, you know, that you don't really know. I don't recommend that, because the intimacy that develops is so powerful. The relationship that deepens is so powerful. So when you do it with a sponsor or a trusted advisor, you know, they are often not just listening. There's something very powerful about the process of listening and sharing.
Yeah,
don't you think
it's
your own experience?
Don't you think it's best to do it with someone who has actually worked the steps and been through it themselves, and maybe someone else has sat with them? I mean, isn't that the best case scenario?
I think that's the ideal. I know people though who have had some really positive experiences with clergy, you know, and doing it with them. And, you know, but I certainly think the power of the step happens in that transformation, and other people that have, you know, another person who has experienced that transformation, has experienced that intimacy and that vulnerability, and who has really been able to come from a different place with, you know, his or her resentments, fear inventory, sex inventory, where the power of that has been lessened because they have worked the rest of the steps, like you're saying. I mean, I think that's probably the optimal way to do it. But, you know, I certainly recognize that people do things in different ways. And I think, you know, finding the right person for this is a really important component of it, because you are sharing so vulnerably and so honestly about your life.
I'll tell you, go ahead, Camille.
No, I was going to say, I think there is a lot of power, like if you can relate to a clergy person, but I know, like for me and a lot of other addicts that I've worked with, just being able to be on the other receiving end of somebody doing their 5th step and saying like, hey, like I've been there, because a lot of times like these are things that, you know, in my head, I'm like, this is going to the grave with me. Nobody is ever going to know this. And then once we say it out loud, and the person we're telling it to, like you're saying it out loud and you're almost kind of like wondering how they're going to react to it. And to have the person on the receiving end just be like, man, I've been exactly in that place. Like that relatability builds what you're saying, the intimacy and like the trust factor, I think. And I don't know too many people that have done it with other people, but it's nice to hear that they are able to relate in the way that you say they have.
Yeah.
The
norm for sure is to do it with a sponsor and deepen that relationship and have that connection.
So I actually did a 5th step with a clergy, but this was a guy with 25 years of sobriety.
Yeah, nice.
So it was a double whammy. But I've also I'm just thinking, I didn't actually do the 5th step, with this person, but I was going to. But I very carefully was choosing somebody that I was pretty sure wasn't going to challenge me. So we're ready for what we're ready, but I really encourage my sponsees to do it with somebody who's going to poke around a little bit, because I can't see myself very well. The 5th step is partly about sharing intimate things that I would not have normally shared with people, cracking open a little bit, and maybe even having a few tears, and becoming vulnerable and open and allowing because that's where transformation happens. I can't think my way into transformation. I have to access that cauldron of feelings. And usually when I'm talking about things that I have some embarrassment about, that's going to crack open, and sometimes I can't get there without somebody look at Dan's eyes. I need somebody like Dan looking at me and saying, all right, go a little deeper, Bob, a little bit deeper, will you, Bob? And I'm telling you, somebody that hasn't been there doesn't know how to poke around like that. So anyway, why do we need to share these resentments and fears and all this nasty stuff, Dan? Why do we have to do that?
Yeah, right. Well, it does say pretty clearly that if we don't do this important step, we might not get over the drink problem. And so, I mean, I think there's a lot of us who believe our sobriety is contingent upon doing this step. But I think part of it is we carry around with us so much shame. There's so much shame about how we've behaved, about how we've treated people, about how we were treated, about what we've experienced. We carry these resentments. I love that line that a resentment is like poison, taking a poison, expecting the other person to get sick. And those deep feelings of resentment can be so paralyzing to our relationships, so paralyzing to our sense of self. And then the fears, everybody has fears, but the amount of fears that we see with alcoholics and addicts is just so powerful, and we don't speak about them. Yeah. I mean, that's the difference, is that now, like you said, you're telling your truth, and you're telling this side of who you are in your experience, the kind of things that people drink over, the kind of things that people are trying to deal with on their own. And now you're inviting somebody else into your life and saying, help me with this. Yeah. You're inviting somebody else into your life and saying, this is me, warts and all. Yeah. This is how I treated people sexually. This is what I've done sexually. This is my ideal sexual image and what I'd like to have. But this is also things that I've done, in my sexual inventory. Yeah. It's so powerful, and it's such a humbling thing. I mean, I worked in drug courts for a long time, and I would coach and give like the judges and all the people who were part of the recovery court team. I would often just say, like, you're asking this person to do a 4-step and you're treating it as though, like, well, they haven't done their 4-step yet. And you're not like honoring what you're asking them to do. And I sometimes would even say, have you ever done this? Have you ever done a 4-step? And of course the answer is no. They're not most of the time, they're not in recovery. Wonderful people. But don't ever take for granted the amount of effort and courage it takes to do steps 4 and 5.
That's right. And that's coming. So that's coming from a trauma-informed practitioner right there, because here's the deal. My character defects or wrongs or shadows or whatever you want to call them got me here. And there's a part of me that thinks if I share them and with you, and then I've got to change, I got to let go of them. I can't do it anymore. Well, what's going to be left here? You know, lying, cheating, and stealing is the only thing I got. But you know, for a lot of us, there's a terror that we have inside in changing the ways that we've been doing our relationships, and we don't even know that we have that there's that much terror until we get up against the invitation to write this stuff down and share it with somebody. So one of the things that one of the dudes that I listen to a lot says, you know, it's probably best to not make such a big thing out of this 4th and 5th step. Let's take it methodically and kind of it's just the next thing to do. Because I think we tend to do that. Oh my God, it's so powerful and intense. No, just sit down, write the shit down, and then we're going to meet next week and you're going to tell me what you wrote down.
Yeah. No, there's wisdom in that for sure, because people do build it up, and the experience is powerful. The experience of the 5th step is what's so powerful, because, you know, it's like Camille said, this is stuff I'm thinking to take to my grave. I wasn't thinking to talk to anybody about this, and now you're telling me I need to talk to somebody. I mean, there is such precious humanity that is shared in the 5th step so often. And, you know, I consider it a very sacred thing. So I really create and advocate for creating a sacred space before you do it. Meditating together, making sure that phones are turned off, making sure that the area where you are is, you know, a safe space, an open container. Not an open container, but a safe area for bringing this work in. And so there's the sacredness of it, to me, is something that I have experienced with other men. And I can tell you that I have heard everything in a 5th step. And when I say everything, I mean, I have had guys talk about the worst things that you can do to another human being and the pain and the anguish that they experience. What they've experienced and what they've perpetrated.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's unbelievable to try to create a safe, loving space, because I mean, that's another part of what happens. I mean, I think, I know it's not the official principle of the 5th step, but love is a huge component of this when it's done with, you know, caring about it from the sacred component from, you know, that it can be.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, I love what you said about just creating the sacred space, because that, I feel like there is a lot of pressure on some people, depending on what sort of environment they're in, to, you know, let's get through the 4th step and do your 5th step, and having the other person put a lot of thought into it. And then I also wanted to kind of ask you, like, what is your take on writing down these character defects and, you know, kind of showing the other person when you are on the reciprocating end, and kind of walking through that with them as well? Because I feel like, I know for me, the first time I saw that was a very like eye-opening thing for me, and it was something that really stuck with me for days afterwards, just thinking about my character defects and having someone that I trusted so much to tell all of those things to me, and not be, you know, taking it lighthearted and not just glossing over certain things, but really being, both people are totally into the process.
Yeah, no, that's the powerful connection that happens, and the trust, you know, that's there and that needs to be there. And that's where the responsibility for a sponsor is so important. I mean, like that you can come from a place of humility, that you can come from a place of listening, and writing down the defects, writing down the names and the 8-step list, you know, moving toward that and helping the person establish, you know, I've had guys who talk about how, you know, they sat down with their sponsor, and then at the end, their sponsor had note cards and gave them their, you know, basically their 8-step list and said, you know, this is the beginning of your 8-step list for sure. And, you know, now we have this. Yep, and so there's this collaborative component to it.
Right. The eighth step for folks, the eighth and ninth step for folks listening is where we make amends.
Yeah.
And we don't owe the whole planet amends, by the way. Just you know, sometimes we have some like low self-esteem and shame, and we think that, oh, we're so bad, we got to go apologize to everybody. First of all, it's not an apology. It's a very different process, but it emerges out of this 4th and 5th step. And it's a way to clean up our side of the street, so we don't have to drag around the shame from all that. But now you have said the word humility 5 times, so now we've got to address it. So my dad, old tough guy, right, who later on in life went to one of those weekends that you and I talked about last week, the Mankind Project. 83 years old, he came to that.
Beautiful.
Got more hugs and had more tears than he had in the previous 83 years. It was like, to me, it was the moment.
What a gift.
Yeah,
what
but
a
he's
gift.
just an old wise guy. You know, you wouldn't expect it from him at first, but with some reflection, he has said some really wise stuff. So you and I have done a lot of diagnosing of addiction, and all. There's 11 criteria to diagnose addiction. He actually boiled it down. It helped me a lot. It said, if you got if it's causing problems, you have a problem. So that was one of his wisdoms. The other one was, humility is that thing that you lose once you know you have it. That's a good one, huh?
That's a good one.
That's a
good one.
I say it because I get a laugh out of, I just led a meeting this morning on humility. The daily reflection today is on humility. And I always get a laugh at myself. Okay, so we're going to be the experts on humility. Let me explain to you what humility is. But, you know, I don't have to explain it. I don't know what it is. I don't have much of it. But I think I might have just a little bit more by virtue of having done several 5th steps, listened to a bunch of 5th steps. And the other thing about that is that, you know, I've also had people, when I was delivering a 5th step, say, yeah, me too, I've done that. When I was expecting them to be very upset about the horrible shit that I had done, they were like, yeah, me too. All right, next. So, you know, for folks that are a little afraid of that process, you know, for the most part, we've all got our long list of things. So, but I do, on this humility topic, Dan, you know, there's several passages in the big book that help clear it up for me what humility might be. And from my perspective, I want to hear, it's simply knowing myself, the good, the bad, and the ugly, just having more insight about that. You know, I'm not the worst person in the world. I'm not the best person in the world, and maybe leveling out to just being human among humans. Why don't you say something about that, if you're.
Well, I mean, there's so many great definitions of humility, and, you know, being teachable is one, you know, striving to do, I mean, I think it's in step 6 or step 7 where it says, you know, striving to do God's will instead of living by our own, you know, objectives. But I think, you know, the humility, when I think of humility, I think of that other term of like wearing the world as a loose garment.
Yeah.
I mean, like that there's just a softness to a human being around how they show up. And I don't profess to have a lot of humility myself. I strive for it. But I think like if you can bring it into a 5th step, there's, as a sponsor or a mentor, you know, what the person listening, I think that's so powerful, because I think it takes an inherent amount of humility to do a fifth step, to be the person who's actually doing it. I mean, I think it's inherently humbling to put yourself out there the way Camille was talking about it. I mean, and just to really show yourself, warts and all, you know, naked to this individual, and to have that received in a way that honors that work and honors, you know, what's happened. And so, you know, chances are there's probably been some preparation for the fifth step between the sponsor and the sponsee with the fourth step, where they've reviewed it a little bit, where there's been some coaching about fears or about resentments or about, you know, this part of the resentments, so that when you're doing that fifth step, this connection to what's happening and to the, you know, to the sponsee or to the individual who's doing it in a really powerful way. Yeah, I think it's such an amazing step.
Yeah.
It's I think it's when we move out of isolation and into our first experience of community, you know, like we get that sense that we're just not alone. And I think, you know, that's
yeah, there's a quote about that in the 12 and 12. There's a couple of them. Our first practical move toward humility must consist of recognizing our deficiencies. No defect can be corrected unless we can see it clearly. And there's another one here, which is about moving toward connection. Until we, it's about belonging. Until we had talked with complete candor of our conflicts, right? All these conflicts that we kept tightly concealed, right? Like Camille was saying, that no, are you kidding? I'm not going to tell anybody about that. But once we start cracking those open, all right, and listen to someone else do the same thing, because that's what happens in a good fifth step. I'm going to get, hey brother, I got the same thing when I was out there. I did this and that and this and that.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So up until that happens, we feel like we don't belong, right? It's like the guy that comes into the meeting and just sits way in the back and never really kind of judging that guy's worse than me or that guy's better. But then when he cracks it open and somebody says, oh yeah, me too, brother, then we start feeling like we're connected. And we as humans, period, need to feel connected. It is a basic need. We need to have that love feeling with each other. Food, water, shelter, love. And, you know, for those of us that went out there and were medicating ourselves with counterfeit spiritual injections of many different kinds, we have lost the ability to have genuine connection, and we have to walk our way back to it. And it says this was the beginning of a true kinship with man and God. Pretty strong stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, for those who are listening, whether they're in the 12-step fellowship or not, you know, I can't say enough about the power of doing the 4th step and giving yourself the gift of that relief, and then the power of the 5th step and giving yourself the gift of even that added relief, that greater relief. Because, you know, when you're doing the 4th step, you're carrying that stuff around still.
Yeah.
And you're still kind of on your own. You know, maybe you've got a burgeoning relationship with a higher power and you've got some connection to the higher power. But I think there's something so profound that happens when you invite another human being into that process. There's a poem that I heard early on in the rooms, and it was, let me see if I can remember it. I sought myself I couldn't see. I sought my God, but God eluded me. I sought my fellow, and there I found all three. And I heard that, and it was like instantly memorized, because it made so much sense to me.
Yeah.
It resonated so deeply with me. And so that fifth step, that invitation of another human being into who we are and into that process, it's deepens my connection to myself and to my connection to my higher power by having that other person there.
Yeah, man. The way you just said that is so there's this thing when we talk about it's a confessional, and we've referred to clergy several times here, and we a person could be listening to this and it's like the Inquisition, this fourth and fifth step that where you got to come in and do the penance, and there might be flagellation. You know, I love that word, flagell.
I do too.
Very close to flatulence, but it's a different word. Flagellation, where you hit yourself on the back with this. It ain't that. It's what Dan just said. It's a gift for yourself to get this burden off. And but when we're on this side of it, it feels like it's almost like a punishment. I got to go say all this bad stuff. And every time I've done a fifth step, I just felt 1,000 pounds lighter. And it's a gift to give ourselves, right? It doesn't seem that way as we're heading toward it. Anyway, that's the fifth step. Any other wise things to be said about the fifth step today, you guys?
I like everything we've covered. I like thinking about I love that poem you just said, because it's so true. I remember my first fifth step so clearly in my head, and just the connection I felt with that other person. I was like, wow, I'm going to remember this. And the person I did it with, I'm still, very close with today, and just in a different way. And I still think about that. I'll have like little flashbacks of just how comfortable I felt in all of it, and how I wanted to do that for other people and be that connection between, keeping the channel of God open for them, or spirituality, whatever.
Yeah. So. I think, the one thing I might add as a caveat, this opens up a whole nother, ball of whatever, but, my job as a listener to a fifth step is to be a safe place. Mm-hmm. My job in being a safe place is in sharing myself as much as I'm expecting the other person to share who they are. And I had this experience, and I will say that there's a lot of abuse and trauma that come up in the fifth step. And there's this idea in the fourth step and in the 12-step community that says, well, what was your part? What was your part? And when somebody's talking about resentments they have toward their parent, or toward an abuser, or toward a parent who was abusive, or an abuser, there's this temptation that people have to say, well, what was your part in the abuse? What was your part in the abuse? And I just want to make it like really, really clear that if I'm going to be a safe place, part of my job is to make it clear to the person that they did nothing, that there's nothing they could have done to deserve that treatment, that there is no part in being abused or being traumatized other than, and this is equally important, I've learned, other than how you experience it today and the degree to which you're carrying it as an excuse to how you treat other people or treat yourself. So the degree to which you carry that with you, and it has become a definition or a narrative of you, and has led to your treatment of other people, that's your part. That's right. But just to really emphasize that, because I had that experience where I was opening up about some abuse that happened to me, and my sponsor, with the best of intentions, really brought in my part and what I had done wrong. And even if I was a really poorly behaved kid, that's not my part. That's not an excuse or a reason to hit somebody or to treat somebody abusively. So
it's pretty,
like I said, that could open up a whole nother can of worms, but I felt it important to bring that up.
We know who we
Yeah.
invited here. We invited a trauma-informed human being to
Yeah.
this podcast, and that's exactly what it's the message that needs to be told. It's and because it's not just the 12-step community, it's the world in general, it's the clinical world. A lot of people do not know how to hold space for other people to be hurt and wounded. They've got their own unresolved stuff and they get triggered and they want to shut them down. Sometimes it's easy to just say, what's your part? That's a way to not feel my own stuff, right? So but here's one thing that I know you and I have chanted to many people, and I have to chant it to myself, and it goes like this. Your childhood wounds did not cause your addiction, but you have to look at it. We have to look at it, because we can't say it caused my addiction, because then it's like, why do I need 12-step recovery? I'll just go to a therapist, right? No, I have to look at that stuff, and I have to look at it honestly and talk about it. But the beautiful part about the fourth and fifth step, and that inept person that you were referring to that said, what's your part? There's such beauty in the fact that we don't get to be a victim anymore, really. It's those days are over. I don't get to say, this is why my life is shitty, because they did that to me. I don't get to do that. But I have to talk about what happened to me and have those feelings. It's a hard paradox for a lot of people.
It is. It's an important paradox, a really, really important paradox, because the relief and release from being the victim takes us from always exercising the victim to exorcising the victim.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's right. Well, and I'm going to be doing one or the other. I've got to dig into that stuff. And I think maybe the best phrase you said was a sacred space. Find yourself a sacred space. Create sacred spaces where it's okay to be me, right? That's what we're trying to do, because so here's a little bit of just to kind of move toward closure on this topic, and then I've got like a little lighthearted question to ask the three of us. But here's a little sales pitch for doing the fourth and fifth step. This is a plaque that you might know about, Dan. I don't know if you know about that plaque. Apparently, the Dr. Bob, one of the founders of AA, had on his desk for many, many years, apparently. And it was entitled Humility. And it's not really a definition of humility, but for me, it's a little sales pitch. Like, if you really do this work, you're going to get this. All right. So it says humility is perpetual quietness of heart. Would you like that? How about that?
Yeah.
Okay. Perpetual quietness of heart. It's also to have no trouble, or to be fretted or vexed, irritable or sore, to wonder at nothing that is done to me, to feel nothing done against me. It is to be at rest when nobody praises me. And when I am blamed or despised, to not get upset over that. How about that? I guess you could go into politics and you would learn how to be blamed and despised, and you'd have to learn how to not be, well, all right, that's another topic. It also says it is to have a blessed home in myself, where I can go in and shut the door and pray in secret and be at peace, as in a deep sea of calmness, when all around me is seeming trouble.
That's beautiful.
So yeah, that'd be good to have that, wouldn't it?
That'd be great. That'd be great. And thanks for sharing that. In all my years in recovery, I've not heard that. I don't believe.
Camille, I found something that Dan didn't know about. How about that? Did I get a gold star? Actually, at my home group, they have the plaque up there. Somebody donated it, so that's
nice.
That's the only reason I know about it. All right, so I have a question for you folks. A musician that has, in the songs that they've written, a songwriter that has songs that have really touched you in your healing. Who is that? And yeah, anybody can go first.
Oh, well, there's many. Music means a lot to me. I play music. I'm in a parents band, a dad band, and
I know.
Dad mom band.
It's kind of why I picked this question.
We're called the Rusties.
Nice.
And but I would have to give first spot to Bob Marley.
Nice, Bob Marley. How about one quote, one lyric?
One.
I put you on the spot with that.
Yeah. I'm blanking. Nope.
We can come back to it. I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. I'll go next.
That's fine. That's fine. That's good.
Because it's not fair, because I have mine kind of teed up. Billy Joel, to me, is the poet of my generation. And there's a line in one of his songs called James. And there's a line in every one of his songs that I go, yeah, almost like Larry David. Larry David, yeah. Billy Joel. Okay, so it's do what's good for you, or you're no good for anybody. I love that line. It's in a song called James. All right, Camille.
Man, it changes so much for me. But I guess right now, I'm always like a fool for I'm a sucker for like any strong female voice. And I was really obsessed with Amy Winehouse for a really long time. And so it goes probably between Amy Winehouse and then a band called Lake Street Dive. Just very bluesy, soulful, like powerful, strong female voice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. So I think we can kind of close there. I just like to end with something a little bit fun. Anything else you want to say, Dan?
Well, I was just thinking of the quote, and I was thinking of the emancipate yourselves from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds.
Yeah. Say it again. Say it again.
Emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. That's from a Redemption song, and that's a pretty powerful one.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Very true.
Okay. Thanks for that. This was a fun discussion. I think we absolutely have this step figured out.
We nailed it.
Yeah. Nobody has any of this figured out, but it's fun to dig into it and play with it. And I'm so grateful for the founders of this program, man. It's like it came through them like, they're just a couple of guys like you and me, probably mostly, and just for some reason cracked open at the right time, and the wisdom came through. And I've been so fortunate to have the 12-step recovery and the philosophies and the community in my life.
Amen.
So, all right, what's next? Dan, why don't you tell folks again, kind of what you're up to in the world and how they can reach you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the easiest way to reach me is through my website, www.dangriffin.com. I'd love to hear from listeners, and you can reach me at dan@dangriffin.com. It'd be great to connect around and this or last week's episode.
Nice. And Camille, will you say a little bit about what is happening at Deepwater?
Yes, here, and then also you can reach out to us if you want to reach out to Dan as well, and we'll be in that connection.
Right.
So Deepwater's our next experiential facilitators training, June 4th, most likely is happening maybe on the day that this comes out. If not, look it up. And then the next one will be August 20th and 21st. You can email us at admin, @deepwatersrecovery.com, or go to our website, deepwatersrecovery.com, and check out our next events that we've got going on.
I love that title, Deep Waters Recovery. That's fantastic. It captures what I think recovery is about. Getting into the deep waters. That's beautiful.
Good.
Yep, thank you. How about the Deep Waters Intensive? Do you like the acronym DWI?
Yeah, the DWI.
Oh yeah, baby.
Yeah,
it's the shadow.
Yeah.
All right. a blast hanging out with you guys and talking about something that is so important to all of us. I hope so. Thanks for being here, both of you, and thanks everyone for listening. I hope you got to enjoy the conversation, but also deepen your understanding of this the beautiful gift of the 12 steps. All right, you're in the deep waters now.